The Cincinnati Bengals have a habit of not spending all their money. It's time to get some help.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien, and we are Locked On Bengals on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. James and I have been covering the Cincinnati Bengals here on Locked On Bengals collectively since 2016. So if you're looking for a place to get the best daily news and analysis on the Cincinnati Bengals, you are in the right place. The everydayers out there already know that. Welcome back to all the everydayers that make Locked On Bengals part of their daily routine, and all of you out there who make us your first listen. Appreciate all of you so very much. Today we dive into a mailbag that will discuss the opportunity the Bengals have to put the finishing touches on their roster and their history in not always making those moves. We'll do some expectation setting for this defense, for potential areas of improvement on the team. That's coming up later in the show. This episode brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox without needing a console. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. And James, we're going to start with a pair of questions from Bengelman Brothers and Barrett Carter season that are both essentially asking about a topic that we touched on when Geno Stone's pay cut news broke, which is essentially, are the Bengals going to do something here? What's the percentage chance the Bengals sign a potential starter by August at guard, defensive tackle, or safety? Or phrased another way, are the Bengals going to do anything to actually upgrade the roster or just roll with basically the same team as last year plus rookies?
They have to. They have to. I think the moves that they could potentially make, and it has a lot to do, really twofold. This isn't just, all right, well, it's May and the draft is over and free agency is mostly over, and so let's just look and see what's out there. There are real guys out there that can still help this team. Part of that is because they have multiple holes that are pretty glaring, I would say. And at the same time, there's talent in a couple of those spots that just stands out to me. And so when I look at this free agent group and the veterans that are out there, plus the Bengals resources, whether it's current cap space, potential cap space they could clear or will clear with Jermaine Pratt, he may be released by the time people are listening or watch this episode.
How many times have we said that?
12. And I'm going to keep saying it because it could happen right now. Like, I have no idea when, but I know it will happen. There is 0%. I have a better chance of being on the Bengals roster than Jermaine Pratt this year. Like, there's just no, like, unless he went to the Bengals and said, I'll play for $2 million or something. I don't see the scenario. And by the way, if he did that after the Demetrius Knight pick, he's not going to do that. Let's just put that to bed. So you have to get better. And the reason you have to get better is because if you take away, and this was their issue last year, if you take away their star players, let's say their 5 best players 6 through 20 or 7 through 20 are probably worse than players 7 through 20 on a lot of playoff teams, and certainly the Super Bowl contenders. And I think that's where they need to get better and improve. And that doesn't mean that Brandon Scherf is going to come in and be an all-pro, but he can probably help. There are guys that can help. You could go get a Jake Liscow special, Julian Blackmon. Go get him. It doesn't have to be a big name guy, but there are guys that could come in and at least bolster your depth. Maybe they're not going to be the 20th best player on your roster, by the way, but it gives you depth to where if Geno Stone, who's, let's say, 30th on your roster, or 25th on your roster, whatever he is, if he goes down, well, then you're going to the 27th best player on your roster, and it's not a huge hole, a huge drop-off. So I think that part is important too. From a depth standpoint and just overall starters, they could improve in key areas that could make the difference with making the playoffs or not, or advancing in the playoffs and being a legitimate contender or not.
How about Jadeveon Clowney getting released right when we started this segment?
Would you
Not
sign
that
him?
I was just going to say, not that that's really a fit for the Bengals roster at this point, where they've invested 2 first-round draft picks in young edge rushers in the last couple of years. Now they bring back Joseph Osai. Cam Sample's part of this unit. You got Trey Hendrickson, probably. I guess there's a Trey Hendrickson topic that we probably need to revisit several times between now and training camp and throughout training camp, depending on the way that thing goes. But it's hard to see the roster space, the snaps for Clowney and everyone else they have on the roster at this point. So I don't think it really makes sense. But that is a prominent name that happened to get released right as we started recording, so worth mentioning.
It is. It is worth mentioning for sure.
Outside of that, I have a question. What do you think the likelihood is? Like, we both agree that they should, and
Yep.
it could be any number of positions. I wouldn't be opposed to having a better 6th receiver on the roster, because right now you have
Gabe Davis.
great players. Sure, you have 2 great players at the top of your wide receiver depth chart.
Mhm.
You're totally fine with Andre Yosevach and Mike Gesicki being that wide receiver 3 and sharing that role. I'm pretty okay with that. I don't need to get better there. The offense can work with that. But beyond that, where's Jermaine Burton? No idea. Where's Charlie Jones? No idea. And beyond that, there's no actual 6 wide receiver that feels like somebody you'd want to put on the field for offense right now. So, like, you could even talk me into a depth wide receiver. Gabe Davis? Absolutely. Sure. Why not? But beyond that, you could also talk me into a defensive tackle who could play rotational snaps right away.
Sure.
Like, not be a fringe of the roster type of player, like an actual veteran who can play for you.
Do you see a bunch of those? That's the one concern I have is I don't see a bunch of defensive tackles.
No, there's never a bunch of defensive tackles
that fit that. Yeah, that's right. It's tough. But Maurice Hurst, we'll go back to that one. We'll make him our guy, our Calais Campbell of this year. You know, someone.
Yeah,
that you could
different to be clear, but yeah, sure.
Well, different, but I just mean a guy that we're going to mention a lot if he's still available. Now, Campbell's better and a different player and just more established and all of the above, but there aren't many, and so the ones that are out there that could make a little bit of an impact, like you got to scoop them up. And so, yeah, Maurice Hurst, I bet he would jump at the possibility of joining this Bengals team because he's going to get, if he's healthy, he's getting snaps because he would be a good piece of their room.
It's an area where they obviously didn't do enough, but there, to your point, are not a bunch of great choices out there either. There are some players that have experience that could be better than scraping a guy off the street scraping a guy off the street is not a good way to phrase it, but signing a guy off the street in, September, which they've had to do, and really having to patch it together. You want to avoid that situation. But whether it's the players that we've talked about, the Dalton Reiser, Brandon Scherf, Will Hernandez at guard, doesn't feel like that move is coming. Do you have any sense that there's an interior offensive line signing coming?
I don't. I think that they feel confident. Now, what I'm really watching is does Jalen Rivers get a real shot at right guard?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that coincides with it. Like, because if they're like, hey, we're going to give him a real shot, I see it and I can understand it. And by the way, he may win that job if they really did. I like him. I like his game a lot. And there's that. And then on the other side, I love the idea of just getting a guy that can be plug and play. I think Cordell Volson's money overall, like if you're asking all these guys to take pay cuts, again, revisiting the Cordell thing, I don't really see a scenario where it makes sense to pay him $3.6 million this year, unless you really think he can win the starting job and be a starter. And I don't think that's realistic. Maybe they feel otherwise. So that's the Cordell topic, I'd say.
And even beyond guard, so if there's a competition at right guard, like, is your swing tackle really Cody Ford or Jalen Rivers?
Yes.
I know.
Well, yes. Oh, 100% it is. And that's why I wonder if
Is
they're
that
going to let
okay?
Jalen
Like,
Rivers
man.
compete at guard, which I would, but
So
I don't know.
there's a few spots there in the offensive line where it makes sense to us. We've talked about Julian Blackmon, talked about the opportunities at interior defensive line where there's not a ton of options, but there are some guys out there that have played NFL snaps who could be a fifth piece.
I have a free agent that we haven't talked about, at least in a while,
Wow.
that I have to run by you real quick. So we'll do that coming up next. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. And when you sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, you're ready to go. You can play EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty, all of the premium titles, hundreds of games with your Fire TV Stick 4K device. And if you've ever wanted to try Xbox games without the upfront investment in a console, Fire TV Stick 4K can be a low pressure way to start exploring, and especially with the rising Xbox prices, if you saw that. So grab a Fire TV Stick 4K today. And how do you currently stream content? Because I know firsthand, Fire TV 4K, boom, the Fire TV sticks are awesome from a streaming standpoint. All of your favorite shows in one spot. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV locked on to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. All right, Jake. I got a name. I think he's the, at worst, second best realistic is wrong, but maybe second best free agent remaining. And if Brandon Scherff is retired, best free agent remaining. It would be a position that I don't think a lot of people would say is a position of need. I'd be in on Asante Samuel, Jude. I would. Now, I know it's weird with, and it's like, oh, well, you have Cam and you have DJ Turner and you're committed to Dax and you have the Asante Samuel Jr. injury questions. I just think you talk about players that, like, he could come in and be the 18th best guy on your roster, or 15th, or maybe he stays healthy and levels up and is even better. Like, I think he's that good. And so, yeah, that would be a guy I would bring in and totally be open to, even though that cornerback room appears to be set. I think they're happy with it. I think he's a guy that I would target.
Yeah, I think this one is unlikely, so I don't want to necessarily spend too much time, but I'll say if he was willing to come in and be a part of that room without starting snaps necessarily on the table, he could certainly earn them, but it wouldn't be a promise. Then there's absolutely no reason the Bengals shouldn't make this move. On the other hand, that's true for a lot of teams. We've seen quarterback depth get tested across the league, and Bengals fans have certainly seen it every year for the last few years, where your quarterbacks 4, 5, those guys are going to play. They're going to get pressed into action. And so, yeah, it'd be great to have Asante Samuel be part of that depth. The same way you mentioned Gabe Davis earlier, different players, obviously, different parts of their career. But when you can have a guy with a pedigree or who's had NFL success and put them in a room and have them be depth, yeah, it makes a lot of sense for the Bengals and probably a lot of teams. The reason that I see it as just unlikely is just because of the state of the room, right? Like, you add a guy like that to the room, and does that precipitate a trade if he turns out to be healthy in camp and is clearly better than somebody else, or create a sticky situation? Not that a trade is a sticky situation, like that gets you value, but it's just a tricky thing from a roster perspective. The same way we talked about the musical chairs, the defensive tackle going into the draft, where they wanted to get a defensive tackle, didn't. Now it's kind of a weird situation there. The same way that we're talking about snap availability for Jadeveon Clowney, it's a bit of a complicated spot because, and it feeds into our next question too. Like, have they gotten better at corner? It's the same players.
No, they haven't. They have not gotten better at corner. Dax is coming back from an ACL.
Yeah.
You know?
So could they stand to get better at corner? Sure. Do they have the available snaps to tangibly get better at corner if they sign Asante Samuel Jr. and figure that out? Probably, but that's a tricky path to figure out, right? And I think the fact that he's still out there speaks to the level of uncertainty around what's going on with him too.
No doubt. And that's the part that's interesting. But when healthy, because we don't know that part, but when healthy, he's 100% a starter on this group. Like he would beat out one of these guys. Name who, I don't need to name it because I agree. There's no reason to insult the roster when we know they probably don't go this route. But I'm about making the team better. Like I think Asante Samuel Jr. makes the team better than Justin Simmons, which might be a take for some because of the safety realm and the safety room and how things are. But no, I would be in on Simmons just to give you an idea of where I'm at. Blackman is different because I think he'll cost less. So it's hard to compare the two. I think like Simmons, Asante Samuel Jr., Brandon Scherf, those guys are going to cost a little more because of the pedigree, because of what they've done in the league. Even though Samuel is younger, he's not at the level of those other guys when those other guys were peaking. But I just think his talent is there, and I think in NFL circles it is that way. People view him that way. So just a name I wanted to throw out there that I hadn't heard recently, at least in a lot of spots.
The other interior defensive lineman names, if we're just throwing names out, that I think are still unsigned. What's your source of guys that are unsigned, by the way? This will be good for our listeners too. What are you using at this point to track that?
Let me see here. I don't have it up, but let me.
So the other names.
I think I used PFF. Maybe not.
I'm not sure if that'll still be up to date at some point, but some other names that I think are still unsigned on the interior defensive line: Khalil Davis, Taven Bryan, Jonathan Bullard. Those are some of the names that played a lot last year that might still be out there. And there's more than that too. But
it's not just PFF, but for some reason, Google took me right back to PFF. Jedrick Wills, by the way, is your swing tackle that you want. There you go. I'd be on board with that.
He's like a roll of the dice. Can he make the roster and maybe win a swing tackle job? That's where he is for me.
I don't think there's like a legitimate swing tackle out there that it doesn't fall into that category of like, all right, will he make the roster or not? I mean, is there?
The one that comes to mind is Jermaine Ifedi, but he was kind of rough and very up and down last year. But that's the one that comes to mind to me if you're talking about a swing tackle.
Would you, let's just, we're going off the rails. We mentioned Gabe Davis. If Amari Cooper called you and said, hey, I'll play for $5 million, you in on Amari Cooper?
Sure. Like, I don't know.
It's just, you know, what's interesting is like,
I don't think he's taking $5 million for what it's worth.
Maybe not. But a few years ago, it was like, oh, well, the Burrow, the power of Burrow, and he's going to attract free agents and all those things. And then they went out and I like TJ Slayton, but like that's their big free agent guy. And it's not like he signed a $2 million deal to give a team friendly discount, right? He got a good contract with the Bengals. It's like, it's interesting. It's like, when does that happen? When does that work? When do you use the pool? And maybe that's it, is a pass catcher like that. Or maybe you're saying, oh, well, Mike Gesicki would have gotten more on the market or whatever. But I do think that's interesting. And that's the type of guy in a pass first offense that would be like, I'll go be wide receiver 4, knowing that there's going to be some attrition and I'm going to be able to compete for a Super Bowl ring.
So I think about like DeAndre Hopkins when I think about this kind of player. And DeAndre Hopkins isn't taking, like, he's still getting paid, right? Like, he's not taking.
Is he?
Really small. Sorry. Maybe Devontae Adams is a player maybe that was coming to mind for me.
Yeah, I was going to say. All right. Yeah. Devontae Adams getting paid. DeAndre Hopkins signed 1 year, $5 million with Baltimore.
He did at age 33. Coming off a 610-yard year, 5 touchdowns. Devontae was the guy I was thinking of because I was thinking about who just signed with the Rams, and he's still getting paid. And Devontae is still productive. So, like, late career players like that, the 33-year-olds who still have something in the tank, when does that happen for Joe? Like, these guys are signing with teams that are willing to do it, and I think that's part of it. I think there are probably players that are willing to do that with Cincinnati, but is Cincinnati willing to pay the price tag? Like
Yeah.
Cincinnati for DeAndre Hopkins might not get to 5 million. Maybe they're offering 2.5 million. And that's how they see that value fitting into their roster with what they've spent at wide receiver elsewhere. And then the
Sure.
player's like, oh, I can make more money elsewhere.
Maybe. Yeah. No, I get that. Cooper's interesting because like on paper, you could totally see Cooper, Higgins, and Jamar on the
Yeah,
field.
that just like feels so Madden-y, for lack of a better word.
But that's how they. So does Asante Samuel Jr. But in November when you need to cover, or in November when you need to get a first down, like signing Brandon Scherf to the Bengals probably feels maddening. Like all this probably feels maddening to them, right? And it's maddening that it feels maddening to them.
I think probably a lot of people just listen to the 20 minutes that we just talked about these guys and they're like, the Bengals aren't doing any of this stuff. Why are you spending the time on it?
Right. Because they should be.
That's exactly it. We're going to finish the show with a question about expectations, several questions about expectations for this team in terms of improvement, in terms of the defense, coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs are here for you. And look, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free. Share it with your network, get all the qualified candidates all in one place. And by the way, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl and start saving time today. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
As we wrap up talking about a bunch of guys that I honestly, James, do not think are very realistic targets for the Cincinnati Bengals in May or June or July or August, there are questions about realistic outlook for this team. And let's take Cincy Fanatics question here in terms of where's their improvement? Rank these, James. Rank these units from most improvement to least improvement. And I find this interesting. Offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, secondary. Where have the Bengals improved among those position groups in 25?
Man. All right. Let's see. Because I think it's close because none of them are like so much better. All right. So O-line, D-line, linebacker, secondary. I hate this. I hate it because like defensive line, you're saying TJ Slayton and Shamar Stewart. Offensive line, you're saying 2 draft picks. Linebacker, you're saying 2 draft picks minus a veteran. And secondary, am I missing someone? They didn't add anyone, right?
Nope.
Who am I missing? All right. This is a real rock and a hard place. And
that's kind of the point, right? Is where did they get better?
I guess what they would say is new offensive line coach, new defensive line coach, new linebackers coach, right?
New defensive coordinator.
Yeah. Good God.
Development from guys.
To me, it's wild because like it might be offensive line. Like it might, because you're talking Alex Kappa was so bad. How bad was Alex Kappa? He was so bad. And you combine that with 2 guys that I like as prospects. I think that they're better prospects outside of Amarius Mims than any of the prospects the Bengals had drafted in the Frank Pollock era from an offensive line standpoint. And so you add those 2 guys. It's interesting, right? But like I think that's true. I think Jalen Rivers kicks Jackson Carman's behind from a prospect standpoint. Certainly as a versatility and trait standpoint too. So no, it's tough. None of them drastically improved and feel great on paper. Put it that way. I think the secondary is the most stable, but the depth in the safety room concerning. Linebacker is a big question mark because you're banking on 2 rookies and a guy coming off of an injury in Logan Wilson. So it's weird to say because it's not like we have the utmost confidence in it, but I think the offensive and defensive lines are kind of like tied 1 and 1A. And again, I don't feel great about it, but like TJ Slayton matters. Shamar Stewart, I think, is going to matter and may start. And then you added two guys and Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers. It's tough. That's a tough one because I don't feel like any of them got drastically better. And it's really like, all right, well, these two didn't get worse and maybe better. Linebacker, you could argue that, Jermaine Pratt had all those missed tackles, fine. But I still think it's going to take Demetrius Knight a little time to get to prime Jermaine Pratt level, if that's what you're hoping for. And so it's hard for me to envision a scenario where the linebackers are drastically better right away.
I actually have a different answer from you here. I think linebacker is the easiest one for me to say. There's projectable improvement there because the linebackers were so bad last year. Like, yeah, if you're talking prime Jermaine Pratt, they're not going to get there. But last year's linebacker play was a problem. And whether that was schematic, whether that was not trusting things, whether that was the defensive line in front of them, I think that one's the easiest for me to project improvement for because it was, I think, so much of an issue last year. I have a hard time projecting significant improvement on the offensive line because rookies just generally take time to cook. And it takes getting high-level starting play or even average-level starting play from a third and fifth-round pick, if those guys win jobs, or Cody Ford, or Cordell Volson, or Lucas Patrick, or Matt Lee. Like, Matt Lee is probably the one that I would feel the best about of all those guys, being an average-level player if he gets a chance at guard. And that feels like a long shot. So it's hard, despite how bad the guards were last year, to project significant improvement on the offensive line because Orlando Brown, before he got hurt, was playing at one of the highest levels we've seen him play. He's not going to get much better than that level. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully the injury hasn't taken a toll on him. But I don't think he can get much better than the peak he showed last year. Can certainly get better at guard, but projecting improvement at guard with rookies or the same guys is even difficult for me. You might get marginal improvement there. I think Ted's Ted. I don't think Ted's getting significantly better at this point. He's a solid player. That's great. And then Amarius, you can certainly project a second-year leap for. So where you might get, who knows, from the guard spots, like I don't have a great feel for projecting improvement there at this point. If you're thinking the offensive line is going to be the most improved unit, I think that comes down to Amarius Mims. The secondary, you talked about, there's no change there. Any improvement you're projecting in the secondary is Dax is healthy and these guys are going to develop. And these guys are going to fit Al Golden's system better. And that's
Sunday Samuel Jr. comes in and balls out, baby.
Right. Yep. Let's project that one and put secondary at the top. Yeah, like we're not doing that, right? And so then defensive line is, how much of a difference does it make having a nose tackle in there in TJ Slayton? Sheldon Rankin's out, right? TJ Slayton in. How much development do you get from Miles Murphy? How much development do you get from Joseph Osai? Where's Shamar Stewart as a rookie? And then there's still a question around Trey Hendrickson a little bit. We're assuming Trey Hendrickson is part of this, right? So development is driving most of these improvements. Like which positions, which players do you expect to develop? Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson, addition of TJ Slayton. Like, is that elevating the defensive line more than, some of these other units? It's hard, like you said, but I think the way that I'm thinking about it is, which is the easiest to improve? And to me, that ends up being linebacker.
It's the same guy leading it. It's the same guy.
Yeah.
And Logan Wilson. So that's what's so interesting to me. Like, Demetrius Knight better be ready to go. Like that. And he's your age, so he should be good and ready to go. But no, I'm sorry, Demetrius. I'll stop.
Demetrius Knight is young. He is a spring chicken compared to me.
They called him Unk in college.
No, they didn't.
Yes, really? They did.
Oh no.
You need to watch Cincinnati Bengals talk a little more. They called him Unk in college. If you're 19, like a freshman, sophomore, and then you have him at 24, yeah, I mean, you'd call him Unk too.
So the answer to these questions, because most, like 3 of these positions are the entire defense, and one of them is offensive line. It really ties into these other questions that we're not going to have time to really get into in depth. But Matthew Duffy and Huday Stan both asked, like, what's the realistic outlook on the defense? Or is Al Golden going to actually accomplish what he was brought here to do?
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible to answer that question, right? In May, certainly, but like maybe not even in the first month of the season. These things don't necessarily happen overnight. Defense is highly volatile from year to year. It much more so than certain offensive positions that are much more stable on a year-to-year basis, and offensive output much more stable on a year-to-year basis when they're common factors. But the answer to the where's the improvement coming from kind of comes down to the answer to the question, do you think Al Golden can do what he was brought here to do, which is get more out of these various units on the defensive side of the ball with some of the staff changes that we've seen on defense?
Yeah, it's wild because we were limited to these position groups for the question, but I was just thinking, all right, let's expand this thing. Where are they better? And it goes right back to the coaches. And I think there's a larger conversation there. Write that down. Coaching pressure. We haven't done that one yet, even though it's been a topic for sure. That will be another topic that we hit. We have, but I mean,
just come up in like every single conversation we've had.
But that's what I mean. I mean, leading the show, like, all right, well, which coach has the most, like, outside of just Zach in general, but like, which one are you the most confident in? I mean, there's a lot of angles to that. So it goes back to the beginning. We can end the way we started. Hey, improve the roster. How about that? Here's a wild idea. You believe in your coaching staff. Great. Now improve the roster a little bit. Shocker. That could help them win football games. Talent.
When you go position group by position group, and maybe this is what we should have said for the full show, like you said, and try to find where are they better. Joe's probably a little better. Jamar and T are probably a little better. Tight end room is depleted. They didn't add there. Like,
it's worse.
Yeah. You go through all the positions. Running back room, maybe that one. There's one that's clearly better.
Running back is way better. Yes. Yeah. No doubt.
There's one.
No doubt.
we found one. But you go through it, and these questions that I think throughout the process are like, are the Bengals getting better? Every team feels like they're getting better in the offseason. But then when the offseason is done and you're going through your offseason program, you're going through rookie minicamp, you're getting into training camp, and you're like, are they better? Maybe a training camp question, but as of today, that's an interesting topic to explore as well. So something that we can dive into more in the future, in addition to the realistic outlook for the defense and many other questions from this mailbag that we did not get to in this episode. But we've got rookie minicamp coming up for your next episode, unless there's other breaking news to cover here on Locked On Bengals. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.